Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Space Stock News. We've just had the earnings results for Q1 from Astra, and that means we now have the results for the majority of the new space companies that I like to follow closely. So I figured it would be interesting to take a look at all of their earnings, do some comparisons, and just make a lot of super cool charts because they're always really fun to look at. Before we dive into that though, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm also working with Main Street Data for advanced financial charting information. If that sounds like something that would interest you, there is an affiliate link down in the description below. Great site that has a lot of free financial charts as well for all your favorite companies. With that out of the way, let's dive into some charts. So starting off with some Rocket Lab charts for you, because I know there's a lot of Rocket Lab fans out there watching. We have Rocket Lab revenues by quarter. Now this chart wasn't actually made by me, it was made by a member of the Discord server. If you're interested in joining our Discord community, the link is down below in the description. And I'm also linking the address of this chart as well as the next chart made by him as well in the description below as also. So thank you so much to Kruk for being a member of the community and making some cool charts for us. I really like the quarterly breakdown we can see in revenue. It really just shows the massive growth rate we're seeing in Rocket Lab here. So we have the most recent number for Q1 of 2023. It was 54 million, 54.9 million, almost 55 million. And this is on top of some incredibly massive growth in 2022. You can see the revenues going from 2021 to 2022 really almost doubled. I mean, we were past the entire previous year's revenues by, midway through Q2, and then Q3 and 4 were completely just gravy on top of that. So extremely impressive growth, and I know a lot of this was driven by those acquisitions, but I am a big fan of the acquisitions, and there's nothing wrong with shouting them out. So we're looking at a bit more modest growth here for the year, but you can tell from the pace we're on, we're still growing, and we will continue adding to these numbers as the year progresses and keep track of that revenue growth for the company. In addition, we also have another quarterly launch chart. I like this format as well. I just find it easy to look at. Now, we did have a rough 2021. We had a COVID drop that was pretty tough on the company, but since then, we've picked up yet again. Note that it is pretty common to have a low number of launches in the first quarter. We just had one launch in the first quarter of last year before picking up steam in quarters 2 through 4. So even though Q1 might only have 3 launches and we're projecting 15 for the year, I still feel pretty good about getting to that 15 launch number, especially considering we're looking at the new HASTE launch coming up. We're looking at the next Tropic launch coming up very soon, and the cadence just really seems to be picking up steam right now. So you can really see from this chart that we're looking to continue our growth for the rest of the year and be well beyond that previous number of 9 that we had in 2022. And now to some of my own charts. And by the way, I wasn't familiar with this Flourish platform, so I think it's pretty great. I had a lot of fun with it already. Starting off with just base revenue. Now, no single metric here really tells the full story of these companies and which one may be undervalued or overvalued. It's really the sum of the parts, and you've got to kind of make your own opinion, but I'm here to share the data with you. So in terms of the revenue number, now this is just for Q1 of 2023. Virgin Galactic, almost nothing. I don't know how they ended up getting, about $400,000 of revenue. It's definitely not from launching their Spaceship One, but somehow they got $400,000, so good for them, I suppose. Nothing from Astra, nothing from AST SpaceMobile as well. Intuitive Machines now has about 18.2 million, pretty solid. BlackSky 18.4. Terran Orbital going up to 28, and then we have Planet Labs, Rocket Lab, and Redwire is actually number 1 here. I was pretty surprised. I didn't think Redwire would be the one to take top spot. This doesn't necessarily mean they're the best company to invest in, though, because I do have some concerns about some of these other fields we're going to look at right now. So first of all, you can look at your price to sales ratio as a method of valuation. And you can see, I mean, partly driven by the fact that they had such a tiny revenue number, really inconsequential, that really drove up Virgin Galactic's price to sales. But on the other hand, down in the more reasonable numbers where we actually have numbers, because obviously Astra and AST don't have any revenue, so they won't have price to sales. Redwire still looking the cheapest at about 1.12 price to sales. BlackSky 2.27, Intuitive Machines 2.28, Terran Orbital 2.52, Planet Labs 5.45, and then Rocket Lab 9.1. So by this metric, you might be thinking Rocket Lab is looking like it's more expensive with a higher price to sales, but there's a lot more that goes into that as well. Now let's take a look at net losses. So we can see right away that Virgin Galactic is burning a massive amount of money, and this is only for the first quarter, not the full year. They've burned almost $160 million, a ton of money to be burning in a single quarter. Next up, burning the second most is Terran Orbital at 54, and then we have Rocket Lab slightly less at 45, AST, then Astra still burning a lot despite not making any money right now, and then Planet Labs even lower. Intuitive Machines, they're not burning that much at 23, but they're going to have some cash concerns you'll see later on, as well as BlackSky. And then we have Redwire not doing too shabby in terms of the cash burn for the most recent quarter, only burning $7 million. But that brings us to our cash balance now. So if you look at how much cash the company actually has remaining, that's really going to inform how much they can afford to burn. Because in some cases, investing money for future earnings is good. You want to, invest as much as you can to make as much money in the future as possible, as long as you can afford it and you're going to make sure you don't go out of business. We can see that Virgin Galactic, while they did burn a pretty impressive amount of money in this most recent quarter, they do have quite a solid amount in their balance sheet. They've got a massive war chest here compared to all the rest of these space players. But since they're burning it at a tremendous rate, they will need that money. And even so, it may not go that far. So I've made no secret of the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Virgin Galactic as an investment. And this high cash burn is one of the reasons that has me concerned. Next up, Rocket Lab. They also have a decent cash balance, and you can see the burn. Much more reasonable, but you still do have a pretty solid burn going on there for a single quarter. Planet Labs, now you're going to start seeing why I'm getting more and more interested in Planet Labs as an investment, because a lot of things are about to start looking very good for this company, and that's one of the reasons why I'm getting very close to investing in them. I almost did recently, but the stock price jumped up on me, so I'm just going to be watching it very closely. We can see their cash balance is actually only a little bit less than Rocket Lab, but they're also burning less, so they're in a pretty solid position. AST SpaceMobile actually only $185 million on the balance sheet and a burn rate of 42. Terran Orbital starting to look scary. I mean, as soon as you see the net loss getting close to the cash balance, if a single quarter of burn is getting close to the entire balance remaining on your books, that's starting to get scary. So Terran Orbital may be in a little bit of trouble here. Astra, of course, in a bit of trouble. And then we have some others. But I think this next one is actually going to be the most interesting for you. So if we look at cash runway, not rocket science here. We're basically just dividing the amount of cash you have by the amount each company burned in their most recent quarter to see if they continue burning at this rate, how long they can afford to fund their operations and stay in business before going out of business. So number one is actually not Rocket Lab here. It's Planet Labs. And this is one of the things that I really like about this company. Sure, they had a little bit less on the balance sheet than Rocket Lab did, but they're actually burning less. And not only that, the burn rate isn't accelerating. And don't get me wrong, I think Neutron is an extremely important program, and I think it was probably the right move for Rocket Lab. But there is something to be said for investing in a company that is on a steady path towards profitability and not on the downward trajectory of spending more and more money. It's a different investment completely, but it can be comforting to see the trend line on its way towards profitability instead of burning more and more money. One of the reasons I really like Planet Labs. And then next we have Rocket Lab, still a pretty solid cash runway. They have about just under 10 quarters. Virgin Galactic, despite that massive balance sheet we saw, we're looking at only 5.48 quarters. Now, all these numbers are rough. They're not guaranteed, and they may have, receivables that aren't in their cash, so these things can vary quite a bit. But I think this is a good way to look at what company is the most healthy. And Virgin Galactic, despite having that massive war chest, is just burning so darn fast that they only have 5.5 quarters remaining. That's, under a year and a half left. BlackSky, we're looking at 4.14 quarters. AST, again, 4 and a little bit. Intuitive Machines, only 2.16. They didn't raise nearly as much money as they wanted to with their recent SPAC process. The time has clearly passed for going SPAC. You just aren't raising the kind of money you used to. And Intuitive Machines, they're going to need to raise capital pretty soon, I would imagine. And Terran Orbital, Astra, and Redwire, even more so. Terran Orbital, we're looking at barely over 1 quarter. Astra, 1.4. And let's not forget what happened with Virgin Orbit. Once they hit less than a quarter on this, they very quickly had to go into bankruptcy. So these are definitely columns I would recommend watching closely for any of these companies that you may be invested in. Next up, market cap is an interesting one. Check out which company is worth the most. It's Rocket Lab by far right now, actually, and I really thought Virgin Galactic would still be up there, but goes to show, share price isn't everything. It all has to do with the number of shares outstanding, and Rocket Lab leading the pack by far compared to all the rest of these newer space companies. And just look at Astra. That's pretty rough. They're looking at $100 million valuation at this point, whereas we've got Planet and Virgin Galactic, in the $1 billion range, so still pretty solid, whereas these other players I would definitely consider as very small companies, at least going by their current market cap. Now, revenue growth is another interesting one. What we're looking at here is the year-over-year revenue growth numbers, so how much they grew Q1 2023 compared to Q1 2022. And the reason we do year over year instead of quarter over quarter is a lot of these things are seasonal. Often you have less launches in Q1 for whatever reason, and a lot of companies just seem to scale up as the year goes on. So year over year is a very common comparison. And what we're seeing here is Virgin Galactic, yes, they had year over year growth, but it was basically, 19% growth of almost nothing is still almost nothing, unfortunately, for them. So it still doesn't really matter until they start launching in, any kind of volume. So I would pretty much ignore Virgin Galactic's numbers here. Obviously, we have very little for, pretty much no revenue for Astra or SpaceMobile this quarter, so nothing for them. Intuitive Machines, negative 0.1%, so basically completely flat. Expect and certainly hope accelerates, because long term the thesis is definitely for me that they will grow faster at a 25% per year rate, at least for the next several years. BlackSky is showing some pretty solid growth despite concerns around their balance sheet, as well as Redwire and Terran Orbital. These companies are showing actually great growth with 54%, 43%, and 40%. However, all three of these companies are quite small, and there was some concerns around their balance sheet. They definitely might have to raise money in the future. So showing good growth there, but a lot of cash concerns. Now I made a little race chart I thought would be cool, because all these SPACs all go public around $10. I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to chart out how the stock price went for each company, and just to see how each company has performed since they went public. We're going back to about August of 2021 until today. Let's take a look at the wild ride these stocks have been on. Obviously, a massive spike there for Virgin Galactic. We all remember the craziness around their stock price for a while. Rocket Lab having a little bump here, leading the way other than Virgin Galactic. Oh, and Virgin Galactic with the massive crash. ASTS having a nice run. Wow, having a really nice run is ASTS. And we can see it's been a rough ride for basically investors in all these companies since going public via SPAC. definitely not easy on any of us. Some have held up better than others. Astra here down to almost nothing after having a nice spike for a while. But really, AST and Rocket Lab are being the most steady. And I know it's funny, if you look at Rocket Lab, I know it doesn't feel like it's been steady because a lot of us have gone through some rough times holding this stock. But if we look at this chart here and just compare it to, say, Virgin Galactic or even a Astra, like Astra's down to almost nothing. At least Rocket Lab, you know, it certainly had a rough time after that SPAC, and perhaps there's an argument that a lot of these were valued too richly but when going public, but that was kind of a sign of the times. Everyone was valuing growth extremely highly. Interest rates were almost non-existent. You could, you know, trade well on without making any money for years, and that's just not the case anymore. So a lot of that is macro related, but strangely enough, zooming out, even compared to other companies in the industry, Rocket Lab hasn't been as bad as some of these other players. Planet Labs, again, after initial drop there, it's been pretty steady. It's one I'm looking at closely. Personally, out of everyone on this list other than Rocket Lab, Planet Labs is the one I am the most interested in. And I really just thought that was an interesting chart to watch and compare them all, since they all do go public at the same price. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the data to do this on a market cap basis, something else I would be very interested in seeing. Let me know if you have access to data of each company's market cap on each day historically over a period of years, because I think that'd be very interesting to chart out. So that's it for today. I hope you found some of these charts interesting. I hope you enjoyed my coverage of the earnings season for the new space economy. Let me know which of these companies you're following most closely, any concerns you have about each of them, and I'll be sure to continue updating my charts going forward as we get new data every single quarter. I think it'll be fascinating to track. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.